Now today, Alhamdulillah, we have a speaker who is well known for doing non-Muslim dawah. He is also an engineer who works in Bristol. So now I would like Dr. Moin to present his talk on the people of paradise.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, thanks a lot to all the participants who's turned up, especially Talha Mahmoud, who's coordinating the session, who's done it very efficiently throughout. And thanks a lot for the nice time and introduction. Jazakumullah khair. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I can see one or two questions popping up. So I'll probably I'm not sure whether the questions are addressed to me. Whether they're addressed to me or not, I'll try and take some questions at the end of my talk. Until then, if you have any questions and if you're really persistent that you want to, feel free to raise your hand rather than just randomly stopping me with an audio message. I appreciate that some questions you may feel like asking a question imperatively, but I would rather if you can raise your hand and I'll try and ask you when, rather than randomly posing me. It will just make the flow go in a bit uniformly. First of all, so Mahim Muhammad asked a question. I'll try and address it before I move into it. So if someone does not believe it, they're a disbeliever. So I'm guessing you have answered yourself, or you probably understand the point. So, or is it something else that you wanted to ask, Mahim? And also during the talk, I may be asking some part of the talk, I may be asking some generic question, not anybody in particular, but I would probably appreciate if one of you or few of you can say yes, no, or some feedback or respond. Okay. So I can't hear you not yet, or I haven't heard a response yet. I would assume that you can all hear me. If you can't hear me, let me know either through a message or else I would assume that you can all hear me. And I would like to believe, inshallah. So today's talk, I wanted to highlight as Talha Mahmoud has rightly said, the people of paradise. However, obviously, Allah in the Quran talks about three main themes, as we probably know by now, and we have talked in the past. So in the Quran, so he talks about the three main themes are he talks about his oneness, about his unity of his oneness, which is Tawheed. So how we should be believing in him and how he expects us to believe in him. Okay, so first is Tawheed, and then he talks about the Risala, which is the stories and the guidances he provided. So the guidances in terms of stories that he provided to the messengers, which is known as Risala, so the prophecies, which also acts as a guidance not only for the prophets, but the people they preach, particularly Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which our Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam preached it not for himself, but for all his ummah, not only the companions who used to live back only his time, but forever, for everyone. So that's Risala. And the other one is Akhirah, which is to do with what will happen from the day of judgment till the eternal, whether in hellfire or paradise and whatnot. Okay, so amongst the three stream, obviously when Allah talks about the Akhirah, so there can be two outcomes of it, and he's made it very clear. It's either the hellfire or the paradise. Okay, hellfire, people who are doomed for their sins, and then with Allah's Allah's judgment, they'll be given the what they were warned before of the hellfire. And for people who's held on to Allah's commandment, followed on to the way of the Prophet, and believed in Allah and his Prophet and acted upon it, they'll be given the reward for which Allah had already given the glad tidings to. Okay. What I wanted to focus in particular here, and I thought it may well be quite relevant to this day and age, is the people of paradise, but in particular, what we see of our age and how a major chunk of our youth, how we deviate away, and due to our way of life, our lifestyle, and our thoughts in particular, in general, and which actually happens from the age of 10, 11 plus can stay until around late teen. For some who are really, really unlucky and unfortunate, ends up beyond in their early youth to 20s and 30s, and who are really doomed, they carry on if they, as much as they lived, and live a very miserable life. And the kind of life which initially starts in terms of thoughts is it may be, for many is perceived a very cool life. They may think, some may call it a gangster life, some may call it a G life. And there are many social attributes which has been attributed to this in the outer world of fitna, where there are probably so many things where people say, oh, gangsters in paradise and G's and these and that. So I wanted to focus in particular, and I want to make it very clear and cut that there's no gangsters in paradise. This is something we have to be very clear of. Whether you consider yourself to be a gangster because the way you look, or the way you present yourself, or the kind of talks you do, the kind of accents you bring in, the kinds of charisma you bring in, the kinds of physical power you impose, or the kinds of bully you are, or the kinds of things you hold on, whether it's the punches you throw, or the items you use as your weapon to threat people. None of this, maybe in your perception, in your own reflection, in your early days of dilemmas and deflection, I would rather call it, you may, when I say you, I do not refer to anyone in particular in this talk, neither anyone in particular in general, but I'm just saying in general how people perceive themselves to be. Many of us, when I say many of us, I don't mean us in particular in this group or any other group, but in general, what we actually see around. And this has only been going up rather than going down. And we as elders in the community, and our elders as well, we're probably feeling very sorry, but we need to do something about it, which means the first we need to do is identify it, realize it, and then we need to talk about it. And we need to identify where things are going wrong, so that we can actually nib it in the bud, so that we can actually stop our youth going in the wrong path, but coming back to the right path. Okay, so coming back to the point, we need to understand that the G way is not the right way. The gangster way is not the right way, no matter how cool it may look like, no matter how powerful or how influential you may appear to be, or come across to be, or you may perceive it to be. Okay, it may serve a purpose in your mind or in their mind for a moment. Maybe for a moment, that moment can last for a day, week, month, year, maybe, or years, for a few years. Maybe a lot is influenced due to the money they make for some bullying and those kind of mischievous stuff, and also the reputation of fear that they create in people, and then that which they go on to live. But one thing must be very clear, that this does not bring any good, neither to the people themselves, not to the people they do the damages to. Okay, and these damages are two kinds: active and passive. I'll quickly just give you the definition of active damage and passive damage. Apart from the person themselves who's doing it, the damage they do to others, which is the active damage, which is the kind of damage they go and hit someone, or probably bully someone, or they abuse someone. These are people who has been directly affected, and these are active damages. And passive damages are to the community they're doing. So if someone has hurt someone physically, and because of that their family is now in distress, so that's a passive damage to the family. If someone has with the spread of drugs, if someone if 10 or 20 youths now suffering from addiction, so that's an active damage to those 10, 20 youths or whatever. But there is a passive damage in the community, that someone has already introduced something which is bad and now taking them into the wrong path. So you need to understand that there are active and passive damages. And passive damages, although albeit how small or ignorable it may seem to be at times, but these are the damages which usually are knock-on effects, which can actually be everlasting. Okay. Now coming back to the mainstream point.
Where can you give an example of passive damage?
Okay, so passive damage is say someone who goes on to hurt someone, whether they killed him or stabbed him or beat him up. So the person they actively did, or who was the main victim, is an active. So the damages he's done to his body or his mind, or through drugs or bully in his mind, whatever kind of damages it may be. So damages can be physical, damages can be mental, damages can be psychological, damages can be in terms of how they do it with addiction and everything. So the victim is a victim of direct damage, active damage. However, his family may be upset. His family now may be worried, his mom or his parents, or maybe his wife or kids. So they are now passive victims. They have not been directly beaten up, or they have not taken the drugs themselves. They are not influenced by that gory act, but they are now a victim as well, because they have now suffering more or less, if not the same emotions, but they're suffering some in some capacity. They're suffering damages as well. So this is passive damage in a very small, in a very simple example. Does it make sense? I would like to hear a yes or no. If not, then I'll probably have to give further.
Yes.
Okay, so coming back to the point where what I was saying about what Allah expects, and Allah has made it clear, although the term G or the gangster or knife crime or addiction, at least the way it's widespread now, is very unlikely was not present back in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, nor in the other prophets either. Obviously, every prophet had their own kind of challenges, and something similar to these challenges, because there were addiction, there were other kinds of crimes, there are people who were bullied back in then as well. There are people who are abusers in different capacity, in maybe similar, not the same way, but in different capacity, but the acts were probably different, but the idea behind it was probably the same: gaining power, gaining authority, gaining illicit images, and gaining illicit authority, something that they don't deserve, but they just think that, okay, with our muscles and power, I'll probably gain over it. And Allah has made it very clear during the time of Prophet, and this is part of our Sharia. So what is acceptable and what is not, and clearly leading our way of what we know, the gangster way of living, is definitely impermissible. The very first narration that we can pull it out from is from, as we know, Allah has made it very clear in His Quran that anyone who's killed a soul is as if they have killed the whole of humanity. And anyone who saved a soul is as if they have saved the whole of humanity. Okay, so now if I just concentrate on the first part of the ayah, so if I've damaged to a point that I've killed them, or maybe I may not have, or if not I mean whoever has done that act, whether they have killed them or they have caused whatever damage, it's as if they have done it to the whole of humanity. Okay, so Allah has made it very clear with this verse that Allah do not accept a abuser as part of his ummah, okay, as part of his Muslim, as a Muslim. Okay, we should know that unlawful killing is one of the major sins, which actually takes you out of the fold of Islam. Okay, because it's it's a major sin if you deny the ruling that unlawful killing is a sin. Then you actually don't believe in what Allah and His Messenger has preached, which means you don't believe in what Allah's Messenger has preached, which means you're no more a believer. Okay, so this is a very serious matter. Whether you can say, oh no, he's not that kind of gangster, but he only does drugs, or he only sells drugs. He doesn't do it for himself, but he runs a racket, or probably he runs a bully gang, or probably he runs another illicit gang, or he runs another kind of whatever, bribery gang or a pressure gang. All of this can only cause anything that brings a negative in the society, or a person or a society, is unlawful in the eyes of Sharia, in the eyes of Allah, and these are all unacceptable. And Allah has made it also clear in another verse in Surah Tur that every soul will taste, or every soul will earn everything that they have sowed. So if you have earned, you'll only get what you have sowed, which means what you have sowed means planted. So you'll only get what you have done. You wouldn't get anything less than that. So if you have earned something good, you'll definitely get for it. And with Allah's mercy, you may go even more. But if you have done anything bad, you'll get the punishment for it, and Allah will not excuse you unless you repent from it. Okay. What we need to understand is the way of life of a gangster, or the way of life of those kind of and gangster and the likes of people, they are not welcomed in paradise, and they are the one who has been mostly despised of, because they are the ones who spread corruptions in the world, because they don't just do it for them. They don't just have one kind of victim, which is the active victim, but they have a passive victim. Most likely they actually have large numbers of passive victim, which actually has a knock-on effect in the society, and eventually they end up not only destroying that person or a few person they thought they were destroying, but they end up destroying communities and communities. Okay, so that actually has a knock-on effect, which will be from the second verse that I quoted. You'll keep on earning just like you'll earn for someone who prays and brings in another person for prayer and carries on bringing, like does dawah and then teaches people Quran, they will reap the benefit of doing all the good stuff. Similarly, someone who's done something bad, and probably that bad has had knock-on effect, this will definitely bring in the same sin on him, just like the reward will be brought in for everything that's so. This is based on the reference of the second ayah that I quoted. Okay, I'll just pause here before I move into the what happens, the stages of the conditions for getting into paradise, and how this will decide that whether gangsters and the likes of them are allowed or not, or whether they are from it or not. I'll just like to take a question and pause here for a bit. Tahmina Akhtar, you have got your hand raised. Can you say yes? You can ask. I'm not sure whether your name is Tahmina Akhtar, but there is a person named Tahmina Akhtar who's got his or her hand raised. Do you have a question, or you've just got your hand raised?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Yes.
My question is, do you know the part about why you said these people cause passive and thing? Could you repeat that part? Like, what type of people do this?
Okay, so if someone was going to hurt me, and if someone thinks that they're a gangster or the likes of those people, yes, a bad people, they say. Gangster is a very cool term, which is perceived. Well, it's not a cool term that I would like to say, but for many, they perceive it to be a very cool term. Okay, so the people of those quote unquote gangster term or their likes, they would probably like, and if someone of those kind was going to hurt me in whatever capacity, whether by influencing me into bad stuff, including drugs and stuff, or probably abuse me or bully me, or probably hurt me physically in whatever way, to an extent to taking life and threatening with life, I am a active victim for them. Okay, direct victim. Not active. I'm a direct victim for them. The passive victim would be my son. See, if something happens to me, my son will be jeopardized. My son's life will be jeopardized because he completely depends on me. So will be my wife, who probably depends on me, or probably who depends on me emotionally, financially, physically, everything. Similarly, my parents, who probably depends on me emotionally from a family perspective, and they probably hold on to me in a very high regard. And if something was going to happen to me, they will be similarly a victim of that stress. It may not be this exactly same damage, but there will be some damages. And each of the person that I've just named will be affected in various capacities. Some may be more than the other. Okay, obviously it all depends on the context, who will be affected how much, but this is a completely different topic and debate. But we need to, if you're able to understand the kind of direct damages and the passive damages, this is what I was trying to get. So passive damages are the people who are affected in the secondary term, okay, not primary. So primary damages are so the person who has been directly physically hurt or probably bullied or whatever, and maybe the person who has been bullied or physically hurt, their parents, their family member, their loved ones are now physically, emotionally hurt because something wrong has happened with their loved ones. Make sense? Yes, no? Talha? Because Talha, I think you asked me the question. Is it okay?
Yes, Jazakallah.
Okay, wa alaikumullah khair. Okay, I understand there is a bit of short time. Obviously, this is a topic I have heard from my sheikh, and he's gone on hours of talk, but I've just tried to capture 1 or 2 references and just go on that, but also give you a bit of touch base on keeping. So whether the gangster is involved in knife crime, whether they're involved in gun crimes, whether it's this side of the world or the other side of the world, it doesn't really matter. A gangster is a gangster, and their lives are them, okay? And they are not part, or they're not welcome, the only tidings they receive is not the glad tidings of Jannah, but only Jahannam. Okay, and this is due to the main primary damages we have just highlighted. Obviously, there are a lot to talk about. I wouldn't go in there, and this has been clearly referenced by these 2 ayah. Okay, they will be getting what they sowed, and for any damages they do to one person is as if they have done it to the whole of humanity. Okay, now coming back to, and because I think we're all on the same page that irrespective of the kind of gangsters or the G's or whatever we have, the gangs and whatever we can call it, all they may be they may be involved in different kind of acts. Some may be in gun crimes, some may be in stealing, some may be in bullying, some may be in drugs and whatever. But these are the most common prevailing terms. But I think we all agree that these are all acts that is neither despised by any society, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, nor it's welcomed by any factions. Okay, and it's something probably they themselves realize, but they probably do it for whatever reason that pleases them. I think so. I would not go into what they do and why they do it, because that's a different topic. But I think if you have established and if you have understood who the G's are, who the gangsters are, or the kind of acts they do and what they think, and whether they're welcomed or not, what Islam talks says about them, I think we have finished the first part. I would like to go into and understand who are admitted to Jannah and whether they could be part of it. Okay. So if you now try and look into the stages of a person's life, not only the worldly life, but the overall journey, anyone who's a living person, then the next step is, once they pass away, the next step is they go, obviously physically they go into graveyard, but their soul is left in the alam barzakh, and then from there they wait until the day of judgment, and then from on the day of judgment every soul will be accounted, or will be taken account against all that they have done, based on the ayah that we just quoted earlier. And based on that, based on the accounts, they will be asked to provide proof or negate against what they wanted to say, and Allah will show, with all the accounts, he'll show clear proof that what they have done, whether good or bad. Okay, and then obviously based on that, they will be accepted in the Jahannam or Jannah. So I think we all agree to it and we understand it. In the stages, but before we move into that stages, obviously there is a kind of test. You know, when you say for some people, we'd like to go into a top school or a top university or a top institution, maybe let's say a competition. But before you go into the competition, you have a small test, which is like a pre-test, where they do like a preset requirements. So you have a prerequisite you need to fulfill, and they ask you some not easy questions, they ask you some basic questions just to see whether you're the right person, you've got the right mindset, you're ready for the next step. Similarly, you have that, and you have a preset prerequisite question in order, it's like a filter. So which is actually, you have to sit that test during not when I say you, it's mean I and you both, and everyone who's left will have to sit the test in the grave. Okay, and this is called the question of graveyard. Do we all know that there is a period, there is a test awaiting all of us in the grave? Yes, no? Okay, yeah, I think we all know it, but whether we know the questions, that's another question, but I'll go through the question in a very short summary. So in the first step of recounting or accounting will be the test in the grave. And the test in the grave is very straightforward. It may be easy for some, and it may be very difficult for some. There is no middle ground. Okay, there is no gray ground, not middle, sorry. There is no gray ground. Some will be able to answer it clean, clear, concise. Some will never be able to answer it. And the way to answer these questions is not by learning the answer in this world, but by practicing the answers. Okay. Anybody knows what the questions are?
I have a question.
Okay, go on.
Will those questions be said in Arabic to us or English?
That's a good question, isn't it? So this is something Allah and His Messenger did not. They were neither asked nor they clarified, but it will be asked in a way that we will all understand. So Allah being the Most High and Just, as one of His names are, Allah will be very fair in terms of taking the question. When we say if we think that, you know, when you walk into a test and if you know, and some tests you really like because you think the teachers are really nice and fair, they're very fair to you, very upfront, straight, neither too flimsy, not too strict, but they're very fair. And we really like them because I know we going in that we won't be disadvantaged, and they will make the questions very easy, very straightforward for us. Not too easy, not too hard. Just as much as to the point that we can all attain it. Similarly, if Allah is known to be the most fair and the most just, so there is no doubt He'll ensure that all the questions are presented in a way that we are able to recount for all the accounts. Okay, whether that will be in English or Bengali, Urdu or Arabic or whatever language is something I'm not aware of. Neither it was clarified. But what has been clarified is Allah being just, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned that Allah will make sure all the recounts are clean and clear and concise to you, and you'll be able to fully accept and acknowledge it, and then agree to it as well. And you didn't deny anything that He will provide you as proof. May well be English or Bangla language or Arabic, I'm not sure. And I think this will be the last concern of a person who is actually taking the test back then, because things will be clean and clear as water for them, and they would not really worry about the language. But thanks for asking, though. It's a good question. Sorry, someone's asked you, who is your Lord? What did you? Okay, someone has written the question. Jazakumullah khair. Yes, thank you. We'll come to it. We'll understand it. So we have next. Yes. Okay. So obviously, the first set of tests to get in, and which will predetermine our kind of status and our journey, or the next onward journey, is the 3 questions. And these are the 3 fundamental principles of our, this should be 3 fundamental principles of our way of life. Okay. Mahi Muhammad has asked what language would it be. So I think I've just discussed it. So you must have found out by now. So the first question, as someone rightly put it, Allah, in Arabic, it's known as Ma Rabbuka, or it will be asked, who is your Lord? Okay. So who is your Lord? You will be asked. Anyone who's worshipped his or her Lord properly and fully submitted to Him, fully submitted to Allah, and also not only submitted, but also made sure that they have accounted for all the obligations they have been asked to, and stay away from all the things that have been made forbidden for them. They'll be able to answer it clean, clear, and concise. My Lord is Allah, and very happily. Okay. The second question will be asked, what is your deen? Or, which means, what is your religion? Okay.
So
Anyone
what's that in Arabic?
Sorry?
What's that in Arabic?
I think ma dinuka. So what's your deen? But as I said, we don't know whether it will be in Arabic. It may be in Arabic, and you'll probably be fluent in Arabic by then, or Allah with His majesty will probably make you fluent in Arabic during that time. We are not sure. And as I said, this will be the least concern of the kind of language, how comfortable it is, what's the temperature in there, whether it's a night, daytime, who else is listening. Because at that moment of time, people will only be worried for themselves. And as he said, even the mom would not be willing to listen to a crying child as if her baby used to cry back in during his infant days. Okay, because they will be so much worried about themselves. So the second question would be, what is your religion? And anyone who's lived life according to the way of Allah and His Messenger, and not only accept it as a belief, but also fulfill all the obligations, they will be able to clearly and happily and loudly answer, my deen is the way of Allah and Islam, which is Islam. Okay. and Allah's messenger will, the angels will give them glad tidings. And then they will show him or her, whoever they're questioning, that who is this person? And they will show Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not physically, so they will not bring in him, but they will show in what we understand is an image-ish kind of thing, a representation. Whether it's an image or what, we don't know. So I don't want to use the wrong term, because wrong explanation, although we are only discussing for the sake of discussing, but I don't want to use the wrong term to explain something. So a representation of what is actually Rasulullah. Obviously, I and you haven't seen him. There isn't any picture anyway. And if you ask me, okay, if I haven't seen someone, how would I know it? But Allah will make it sure for the hearts who have lived their life according to the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which has followed all the sunnah. Sunnah means not only praying the sunnah prayers, which is after the first prayer. No, sunnah is the way of living in accordance with the way Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam lived, and he asked his ummah to live. Okay, the followers. They will be able to answer it clean and clear and concisely. And for those who haven't, they won't be able to. They will struggle. They will come up with everything else except for Rasulullah. Despite they may be amongst, they may have heard the answers, questions and answers hundreds of times, but if at the time of death they were not on the right path, the only news is bad news. And these three answers will be definitely failed by the people who we have just discussed. And that will make sure the first set of filter will already sift these kind of people away from the way of Jannah, and then the rest is not. And I would probably like to conclude here and take some questions before we move on to the quiz. So is there any questions? So someone also has already asked a question. Is there a chance that if you can't answer all the questions correctly, that he can go to Jannah, or will he be doomed? Yes, so if you can't answer the questions, he'll be doomed. There's no doubt about it. And it's not a question and answer session or exam where you read the book every night. So you can read all the book every night and go to the exam, you can ace it. But for you and me to pass that exam, or for anyone else, we have to live the life according to the three fundamental principles, which is we have to recognize Allah and his attributes and quality, and according to the tawheed of how his messenger and the messenger's followers believed in him. We have to recognize the religion in full capacity and act upon it. Not only recognize it, because there are so many scholars in the world who knows Islam more than many Muslims, perhaps, maybe, but they don't follow it because they are probably don't believe in it, or probably whether they believe or not, they don't follow it because they are probably not in line with it. So they won't be able to answer it. And the third question, someone who's never respected and appreciated Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they'll never be able to recognize it, despite whether they saw him or not. Okay. It goes on for someone who maybe during the time of Rasulullah, who used to be a disbeliever, who never appreciated Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they, despite them seeing him, would never be able to recognize them. And maybe amongst us, hopefully, inshallah, everyone, all of you, despite not seeing Rasulullah ever, you'll all be able to recognize him, inshallah. Okay, someone is asking another question. What about people of the Araf? What do you mean people of Araf? The people who will be stuck on the Sirah. Okay, so what about the people who will be stuck on the Sirah? So Sirah is a journey which is later. Okay, so not in the grave. And what about the people of Araf? I think Arafah. So what do you mean by people of Arafah? So everyone has to answer the question of the graveyard. Okay. So whether you're in the Arafah, obviously the it will be held in the land of Arafah, which is the day of judgment will be held there. Obviously, we may complete, okay, obviously maybe the land of Arafah may not able to accommodate 7 billion plus Muslims, 7 million people, but that's not a question for you and me, or how Allah will do it, but Allah and in his majesty will be able to do whatever he wishes to do, just like he has done it, everything. The people who won't cross the bridge. Okay. So bridge, and this session is beyond. So we're not talking about the day after. So these three questions are before the day of judgment. Okay. So it's not, so this is the questions for the graveyard. That's why I said these are the three fundamental principles. So I think some of you are mixing it up with the questions which will be asked in the day of judgment. We're not talking about the day of judgment here. We're talking about the very basic filter. Okay, sure. So someone said, did all the prophets be promised Jannah? Yes, all the prophets have been promised Jannah because of their devotion and acts. obviously, and they will be able to answer it, inshallah. So I'll probably like to, given that none other questions are coming in, I'd like to hand you over back to, I think Talha Mahmoud is the coordinator today. So Talha, over and off to you. In the meantime, I would like to wish all the best to all the participants. Whether you win or not, I think my best wishes and du'as are for you. Hope you enjoy it, inshallah. I'll probably see you sometime again soon. All the best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله
سبحانك اللهم
وبركاته.
وبحمدك واشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.